In our previous episode, Lowell Sandell discussed glyphosate resistance in Nebraska weeds. While in David City for the herbicide-resistant weed management field day last week, we also sat down with Stevan Knezevic to talk about how farmers should attack weeds with resistance and how we developed this problem in the first place.
I'm pretty much tempted to say that we've been using Roundup way too much. Roundup Ready soybeans came on the market just 15, 16 years ago, corn about 6, 7 years ago. And basically we are rotating two crops, but we're using the same chemistries. And after use and what I call literally a misuse of Roundup, spraying and spraying and spraying, and we do more of that in soybeans than in corn, basically we're beginning to see weeds showing up resistance. Right now we have only 4 species in our state. Some other states will have as much as 6 or 7 species. Overall there's 12 nationwide and 25 worldwide, simply because of the overuse of Roundup. That's pretty much a take-home message out of this is, come on guys, we gotta do something else. Roundup is a fantastic chemical. It's a 1 in 100-year discovery. We want to save Roundup for our kids and grandkids, and we can still use Roundup if we start using less of it. And I don't mean lower rates. I mean using fewer applications, maybe just 1 shot a year, and then start using other herbicides and other modes of actions. And that's the only way to slow down this resistance.
Do you think farmers understand the importance or the severity of what's happening?
I think that they do understand. It's really hard to give up this tool that it's so simple to use, and it's relatively inexpensive now with generic glyphosate, where you can have a shot of glyphosate for $5-6. It's really hard to beat that price, and then you hear guys like me telling you use other herbicides, and the other option is going to cost you anywhere from $30 to maybe even $50. And some guys that have resistance, they're spending $100 per acre and they're not controlling the weeds. So it's like, that's your spectrum. You can continue Roundup, cheap, and it works for you, and I know it works in a lot of fields, but then what are you going to do when it stopped working? You took that mode of action out of the picture completely, and then you're going to spend some major money. And once Roundup develops in these plants, it just stays in the plants. It doesn't go away. It stays in that population. We've seen that a lot of places now where Roundup is not killing weeds. We're trying to use triazines in corn, like atrazine type herbicides, and atrazine is not killing them. So that means those are atrazine or triazine resistant weeds. Well, now they just added a glyphosate resistance to it. And then in soybeans, they've been using Pursuit or Scepter or Raptor, or tried to use some of those chemistries to kill the weeds that Roundup doesn't kill. Well, guess what? They're not working either, because a lot of those weeds, I'm not saying all the weeds, but many of them are ALS resistant. So there you are now on your field. You don't have ALS tools to use. You don't have triazine tools to use. You don't have Roundup tools to use. So you're out of 3 modes of actions. And that's what we have in Nebraska. We do have water hemp populations that have a resistance to all these 3 chemistries. And it's not widespread, it's sporadic, but this is the time to get on the top of the game.
So the take-home message today is to ensure that farmers know that they should not only rotate crops, but differ their modes of action as well?
Of course, yes. And a lot of farmers know that, but like I said, Roundup Ready is so simple, and it is relatively inexpensive in comparison to other treatments. And especially if you have a big operation, the guys that farm 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 acres, Roundup is just perfect for those scenarios, because they can just spray throughout the whole early part of the season, and they don't need to have highly trained applicators and everything. You'll just sit on the tractor, put the Roundup in, and go out and spray, and that'll work beautifully for about 10 years. Oh, now we're beginning to see problems as a result of that.
If you have resistant weeds in your field, what's the key to controlling them?
Depending on what kind of resistance is it, obviously you got to determine what one is it, and then you got to Open up the weed guide for weed control in Nebraska. We have a herbicides mode of action groups in there, which is, I believe, on page 8. We ranked all these weeds and grouped them by different modes of actions. And then you go to herbicides efficacy tables in the guide, and you choose your herbicides based on the mode of action. So if you have resistance to 3 modes of actions, obviously you got to use the herbicides that has mode of action 4 or 5. That will give you a control. But I don't think that you even want to be on that boat where you have 3 types of resistance on your farm.